What's up? This is Elliot Einhorn. Welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. Today I'm joined by
Nick Dawson, Editor-in-Chief of Talkhouse Film.
We have a very cool episode today featuring the creators of two of the most revolutionary and important television series out there.
Absolutely. This is a really special one. Talking today, we have Mark Frost, co-creator, of course, with David Lynch of Twin Peaks. And Twin Peaks The Return, which is the TV event of this year. And then Sam Esmail, the guy behind
Mr. Robot.
Nailed it. I really loved listening to these two guys talk. They're just so perfectly in sync with one another.
They are also huge fans of each other's work.
They really are. And Sam Esmail grew up watching Twin Peaks. That was the show that informed who he became as a storyteller and sort of really made him want to tell stories in the first place. And for Mark Frost, Mr. Robot is sort of the TV show of the moment that he really loves and is excited about.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear the guys take such deep dives into the origins of each of their shows. I feel like the quote that really defines what this episode comes partway through from Frost, where he says, "We have a chance to do something truly against the grain. Let's break down the doors of what you think you can do."
Yeah, these guys have not accepted the limitations of TV. They have pushed the boundaries. They have done amazing things, and I just love listening to them talk about their process. It's really fascinating to hear Mark Frost talk about, the unique circumstances under which that show was made.
Right, and as he says it, the, quote, draconian level of secrecy around the project. I mean, Nick, you and I work with actors and musicians who are on that show all the time, and we had no hints.
And then also the level of freedom that Showtime gave them to make the show in whichever way they wanted.
Which is incredible.
So yeah, whether you know Twin Peaks inside out or you're relatively new to the show, whether you're a Mr. Robot nut or whether you've never even seen it.
Heaven forfend,
this is for you. So enjoy.
Should we roll it?
Let's roll it.
Well, Sam, it's really nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you. I'm a huge fan.
And likewise.
And this is really fun. It's great to do this together. Wanted to talk to you about this because Twin Peaks The Return is the best show on TV right now, in my opinion. But I know it had like a kind of a weird story coming back to the screen. Love to know how that happened.
Well, I can take you back to how it began.
Okay.
Obviously, the curtain falls for a good 20 years before we pick it up again. And I approached David in 2012, August of 2012. We had a lunch at Musso and Frank's, where we always used to go and have lunch. We liked the old Hollywood feel of the place.
They have good steaks.
Since the 70s. It's fantastic. So I had a way back in, I thought, that could get us there. And I told him about it, and he had been reluctant to go back for a long time, but there was enough of a thread to pull him in to a series of conversations. I think we talked for close to 9 months before we felt we had it. And we weren't going to commit to it until we had it.
And when you say you had it, were you just talking in generally what the story and
what the story was going to be, what the broad outlines were, where we wanted to get to and finish. And after about 9 months, one day we both sort of said, I think it's time to start writing. This was before we talked to anybody. Nobody really knew about it. I mean, our families did, the two of us did.
Right.
So we wrote the first 2 hours, or what we're going to serve as the first 2 hours. And we took it through an intermediary to Showtime. Our home video aftermarket deal had been through a series of corporate sales. It ended up with CBS Home Video. The parent company is CBS Showtime. Right. So it made sense to go there, to keep it all kind of in the same place. And Showtime felt like a good fit.
Now, when you went to them, did you have an idea of how many episodes it was going to be? Like when you
Not precisely, no. I mean, we had the 2 hours, which we gave them to read. They responded enthusiastically. And a negotiation commenced, and we were originally going to do, they wanted 8, we wanted 10. I think we settled on 9 hours. We then wrote for about a year.
Just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
This is how you guys did it
Yeah, mostly on
first-
Skype, because I had moved to Ojai and I don't smoke. and Skype works, you know.
Right.
It's a really good medium for this sort of thing when you're just face to face. So we wrote what felt like 9 hours. I mean, we even put it into episode form.
When you say that, you mean you didn't actually write it the way that traditionally TV, it's like, you know.
Well, we
a
did the
script
first
per
time
episode.
through. We said, let's give ourselves, you know, for lack of a better term, let's give ourselves chapter headings.
Right.
So we know that chapter's ended. Whether that corresponds to an actual hour of TV,
Right.
we didn't really give much thought to. And then by the end of it, David felt, let's take those out and make one script. It was 450 pages. And he hand delivered it, I think, to David Nevins, the CEO of Showtime, in a 3-ring binder the size of a, well.
And there were
there's
no
an old cliche.
breaks, no chapter
Nothing,
titles,
no,
none
just-
of this.
It was a
just
450 page
pages.
film script, the size of the Manhattan phone book. And they said, okay, let's do this. How many hours do you think this is? And then that led to discussions of David's pace is a little bit longer per page
Right.
than the traditional. He said, you know, I don't know. There might be 2 seasons here for all I know. I won't know until I finish. So negotiations commenced, and there were setbacks and back and forths, and it was settled.
Right.
And it was going to be somewhere between 9 and 18 hours.
Wow.
So under those circumstances, we began shooting 6th of September 2015. Shot for, I think, I may be missing a couple days of extra stuff, 148 days.
And did you just shoot all out of order?
Shot like a film. Shot out of location.
That's kind of what we do on
I
on
got
Mr.
that
Robot.
feeling from watching the show that we went up to our original locations in Washington in the Snoqualmie Valley.
Right.
And we spent about 6 weeks there, I think, shooting out all the original places that we'd used. And that was kind of amazing because most of us hadn't been back really since we'd done the pilot in 89, 90. So that had some magic to it. And then we came and did the rest in and around LA. We imposed a draconian system of secrecy on the whole proceeding.
And was that important to you or David or both?
It was both. We felt we have a similar feeling about leaks, spoilers, whatever that category of ideas is. It loses its value if you tell people what it's going to be.
Right.
You know, let them experience it for the first time and then let them decide what they think it is.
Right.
So Showtime saw the complete script. Kyle saw the complete script. And that was it. Everybody else got sides in the cast. Everybody signed NDAs. There were no phones allowed on set. And somehow we made it work. Everybody wanted to make it happen. And our particular community, our audience, was up for it. They said, yeah, we don't want to know what's going to happen. We want to experience it fresh. So no spoilers from us. And I think there was one person, a civilian, who managed to take some very shaky iPhone video from a set from a distance up in Washington. Mm-hmm. That was the only thing that leaked the entire time.
Wow.
And this was 15 seconds of, tiny figures from down the street.
Yeah, that does not happen when you shoot in New York City.
No.
You'll get a lot more leaks.
A lot more.
And paparazzi.
So that was how it came to be. And then David, when he was through post, said, yeah, it's 18 hours. And that's what we went with.
And did you guys get notes on the script? This is where it gets curious, right? Because the bold thing about Twin Peaks, especially the new version, The Return, is it's sort of defying narrative. It's defiance towards narrative logic. There's not even a murder mystery. So was there a temptation to do something like that, to reboot it, to have that one carrot that everyone can kind of follow throughout? Because, I mean, what you guys did was just completely embrace the abstract.
I think the short answer is no. We followed the thread that we found, and we took it all the way, and we filled in all the cracks on either side, and went wherever we wanted to go, narratively speaking, which was really kind of liberating. And it became, I mean, if there's a through line to it, it's Homeric. It's the Odyssey. It's a character going home.
Right.
That's why The Return, I think, became the subtitle that Showtime felt worked in a couple of ways. It's Cooper's journey, largely. Right. And that's what we went with. And I think we both felt, number one, we had to raise the bar from the first time around. This was not going to be, a Dallas reunion 25 years ago. It was going to be whatever it was going to be. It was going to be an 18-hour art house movie.
Right.
And it was going to go wherever it wanted to go. And we were going to, if you're on the highway and you see something interesting, there's like the world's largest totem pole is 5 miles up the road, you're going to take the turn and go up and look at it.
Right.
That's what we decided. And it had a kind of a road picture feel to it in some ways.
Yeah,
it did. There were journeys built in.
And lots of
tributaries.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Like Jerry Horn,
Right.
Jerry needed a through line, so we decided he'll get lost in the woods for the entire time. And he'll end up naked in a bar in Montana, that you just find out about in a phone call at the end. But so there were things like that we felt, let's just throw away the rule book and proceed. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and David, he's adamant about doing things his own way, and he did. He did.
What are you doing another season?
We don't know yet.
You don't know. Yeah. Is it going to be the same thing where if it comes to you, it comes to you? If not,
I think there has to be a compelling reason to do it.
So you didn't do this season thinking, and then there will be another story after this necessarily.
No, not necessarily. But we never say never. We didn't know the last time either.
Right.
There was clearly more unfinished business the last time.
Right.
We were left mid-narrative.
Right.
There. So at the very least, we wanted to feel some sense of completion. And in the meantime, we had this 25-year gap, which becomes its own sort of poignant thematic concern of the passage of time and mortality and how people change over time. And
when you say that was, you approached David and you had that way in.
Yeah.
Was it a thematic thing, or was it Cooper's kind of the good Cooper, evil Cooper thing? What was that thing?
Well, we had that was there from where we left it.
Yeah,
the
second season.
The split, the doppelganger, was set up. So it was kind of a hanging curveball. That was we had to work with that.
Right.
And but then that just then became the conveyance, the motor that allowed us to pull all these and attach all these other cars
right
onto the engine. And so it became a sort of portmanteau narrative where we could fill it with a lot of life from all sorts of different directions. Old cast, new locations. It wasn't just going to be a return to a small town in the Pacific Northwest.
I mean, you didn't even really return Cooper until the very end. Until the very end.
Yeah.
Which I know frustrated a lot of people, but I loved Kyle's performance.
I did too.
I thought it was hysterical.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great that you sort of didn't give us what we expected in any way, shape, or form. Was that going through your mind?
I think, yes, but not perversely so. I mean,
Right.
not as an object and an end in itself.
Right.
It was, let's just go where our imaginations take us and see where we end up. And I know by the time we'd finished writing, we felt we'd reached a sense of completion about the narrative as it evolved. Some people may disagree. They may feel, but that's that. That you can't control that. That's
Is there an answer to Twin Peaks? Would you say, like, I deal with this on my show.
Sure.
The Redditors and the conspiracy theorists and people following the clues. Is there an answer to the show? Are they trying to hunt for something that is there?
The show is not a treasure hunt. The show is experiential. I mean, the destination is the journey. The fun of it is going on the ride and seeing where it takes you emotionally, mentally, psychically.
Is that what drove you when you were writing it, when you guys were creating it?
I think so, yeah.
Were you thinking of, well, no, this has to add up to this in a logical, plot sense, or were you just sort of ignoring that?
No, there was a fair amount of that. It had to have an internal logic that held up to scrutiny, and it had to at least make sense to us, if to nobody else. So yeah, that was probably the hardest spade work that we did was, and I can remember at times being stuck on things for almost weeks where we had to sort out exactly what was going on. And that, you've got to, that's the spine.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the whole thing.
Right.
If you don't have that, you don't really have much.
But is it meant for it to be clear to the audience? Is it meant, like, if the audience didn't get it, or do you feel like you failed in that respect, or is it meant to be open?
I think it's meant to be left to the audience's interpretation. I mean, for me, as an audience member, the things that always moved me the most, we were going to talk about it, earlier influences. And I was going to go back to the summer of 1968. I was 14, working as a young intern at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, where I was about to start high school. And two things happened that I think propelled me into this way of life, this telling stories. The Prisoner had its first run on American television in the summer of 1968 on CBS.
Remember that? Well,
you've seen
I've
it subsequently.
Seen it. Yeah.
And 2001 came out.
Oh, wow.
And those two things imploded my mind, because everything I thought I knew about narrative and storytelling up to that point was blown to smithereens. I came home from watching 2001, and I wrote, I think it was a 15-page letter to Kubrick, because I wanted answers. I wanted to know. Right. I had to know. He never responded. I did mail it. And similarly with The Prisoner, that last episode of The Prisoner is, it's an acid trip. It takes you places that nothing that had ever aired on American television, as far as I'm aware, had ever even approximated. Both of them literally blew the top of my head off and changed my perceptions about what storytelling could be. And I think my course was kind of set by those two events. So I'm sure you would agree with this, knowing your work, that the audience gets to have their own opinion.
Right.
We can't control it.
Right.
It's up to them how they respond.
But I also 2001 was also very defining for me in terms of storytelling. Yeah. But what's interesting is how not having all the answers is actually more liberating as an audience member. From TV shows, movies, it's the abstraction that actually engages me on a much deeper level than, imagine watching something and everything is spelled out for you, and you know exactly what everyone is doing, what their motivations are, and everything is as clear as crystal. that is not an experience
That's inert.
I enjoy.
That's like buying furniture.
That's product. You know what I mean? Exactly. It's like
That's Murder, She Wrote.
Exactly.
You know?
It's flat, and it's the most popular form of it, I guess. I don't know, but it seems to be incredibly successful, especially in TV. Because that procedural thing.
Sure.
I know exactly what I'm going to get every week with some variations, but even the variations are very spelled out and very clear. I've struggled. I've struggled. What is it about? No, it's about not knowing. It's about being confused, intentionally so, that feels more thrilling. From the first season, this is why I appreciate the second season of Mr. Robot a lot more than the first. But I think why it was at the same time very polarizing is that in the second season, I felt that me and the writers and the crew and the DP and the production designer and costume designer, we just took a lot of liberties and freed ourselves from being strict to narrative logic and clarity, and decided to really lean into expression and character and abstraction. And there was just something more electric and just in the making of it. And even when I watch it back, that the first season didn't have, because I felt things were a little more spelled out.
And that's what was thrilling about it. I mean, the first season was fantastically well done. And I had read somewhere that you had mapped out all three of the first three seasons going in for your very first.
I had mapped out basically the entire thing because it was initially going to be a movie.
Right. But for me, and I watched the first season with rapt attention. It really grabbed me. It was the best thing I'd seen in a long, long time.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
And then the second season, it was like the booster rocket kicked in and it took you into another level for exactly the reason you're talking about. Particularly the episode that invoked the old sitcom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That was thrilling at a whole other different level. And I said, okay, Sam knows what he's doing, and I'm going to stay in for this whole ride.
Well, and I remember that day that we were shooting, because we shot the sitcom parts in 2 days, because it's really, you can shoot that really fast. There's not a lot of lighting.
Yeah.
There's 3 camera setups, so you're getting all the coverage all in one setup.
Right.
But that was the day we had gotten nominated for Best Drama for Emmys. And I remember being on that set, and it's this ridiculous gas station set or whatever it was. And I remember thinking, this gets nominated for Best Drama for Emmy. And I remember thinking, there's a mixture of concern, are we doing the right thing here? But excitement, because it's pretty wild, it's pretty out there, and it's pretty crazy. And does it all add up? Does it all make sense? In an internal way, in an emotional way, it did. And it didn't have to make sense in any other way.
It doesn't. As long as it's subjectively true to what you're feeling when you write it and what you're trying to convey. And it doesn't have to be a concrete thought.
Right.
It can be a feeling or a sense of mystery.
Right.
Look, I had broken in on the $6 Million Man. There's no more.
Is that your first gig?
That was my very first gig. And then I was there for 4 years of Hill Street Blues, which in its day was groundbreaking and
absolutely.
And it was on top of its game. But I clearly felt like I was riding along on the evolution of the medium. So when we had this chance to kind of explore Twin Peaks, the appeal to us was, we want a nighttime soap with a twist. And I said, okay, well, this sounds like we can do something really subversive here. We can actually subvert the conventions of the genre, not make it melodrama, but actually base it on a real heartrending tragedy with real grief and real stakes and real emotions.
Right.
It's about an incestuous relationship, and it's heartbreaking when you really get down to brass tacks. And when people saw it, they didn't know what to make of it, because the emotions, David beautifully directed the pilot. They were very real. There was real grief, and the whole first half hour of the show is just seeing the impact of this death on this small community. And it's the quirky and all the other accoutrements that help you go on the ride. But once we landed it, I said, okay, well, we have a chance to do something truly against the grain. Let's break down the doors of what you think you can do.
So did you go to David with the idea? Or did ABC come to you?
No, we knew each other already. We'd met and written a couple of scripts together 3 years before. One that I wrote that he was going to direct about Marilyn Monroe, based on a biography of hers.
What happened to that?
The book, it was based on a book called Goddess by Anthony Summers. It was a brilliant British journalist, political journalist. And it was the first book to really rip the cover off the relationship with the Kennedys and the mob, and raise the very real possibility that she may have been murdered, or at least accidentally killed, as opposed to a suicide.
Right.
United Artists had bought the rights to the book. A producer hired me to write it, and David was on board to develop it and eventually direct it. That's how we met. Wrote the script, turned it into United Artists. We discovered within 48 hours that Ethel Kennedy was on the board of directors at United Artists, and they turned it around over a weekend for pretty obvious reasons, if you were to read the book or the script.
Right.
So that put a pretty...
that sucks, because that sounds amazing.
I think it would have been a pretty
movie.
interesting project. And Jessica Lange was set to play the part. I mean...
Oh my God.
Peak Jessica Lange, she was born to play that part.
That would have been...
It would have been something. So that didn't happen. We then wrote another script, a comedy, a very bizarre comedy called One Saliva Bubble. David had a deal with Dino De Laurentiis. And it was an antic comedy with, interestingly, two actors playing double roles. And we had Steve Martin and Martin Short. And we were something like 6 or 7 weeks away from production, and Dino went bankrupt. And David got the script back and turnaround, but the movie went away. So we'd had those two experiences.
Right.
And we got a call. We were both at the same agency, and an agent called and said, ABC's interested to know if you'd like to come in and talk to them about an idea for a show.
So they had the idea.
The precedent that they cited to us, or the antecedent, was we want to do Peyton Place, which had been an ABC show in the 60s. We said, yeah, well, that's interesting in its own way, but we're not going to do that. But the small town, The Secrets in a Small Town is an interesting area. We'll go with that. So that was how it first came about. So when it fully hit, the idea was, we've got the ball, and let's just run with it. Let's just go places people haven't gone before.
Did you go through the process of writing a pilot, making the pilot, testing the pilot, and then getting the pickup after that?
Laboriously, yeah.
Did you know when you wrote the pilot who the killer was, the ending, and all that, or did that not matter? Did you? It
didn't matter to us.
Yeah,
we had an inkling, but we didn't know quite yet.
So you Trojan horsed this thing.
Kinda, yeah.
You used the nighttime soap model, but it was an excuse to do.
It was an anarchic. Let's throw a bomb into network nighttime television and see what happens. And it was ABC. They were in third place. They had nothing to lose.
Yeah,
they were going to take a roll of the dice here.
I feel like I feel like with Mr. Robot, we were kind of in a similar position. I mean, USA always has done well, but I think they really wanted to reinvigorate the drama slate, and I think they just rolled the dice on us.
Well, and that's why I remember watching the first few episodes, and every time at the end going, "This is on USA." This is really interesting, because that's.
But I feel like. When Twin Peaks came out,
ABC,
everybody was saying this is on ABC.
Yeah, and finally, that's the thing. It doesn't much matter what the delivery system is, as long as you get it out there.
Right.
And what excited me about Mr. Robot, for a lot of things did, but so few shows contemplate the world as it is, and deal with the hidden underlying realities of big systems like capitalism and society, and what is the price we all pay for living in a system like this.
I think the other thing, aside from trying to be entertaining and taking you on this ride, this experience, there is something about wanting to also use that, I don't know what you call it, the real estate, whatever, to say something about what we're going through as a society or as a group of people, as a community. And I have to talk to you about this episode, the episode 8, which is of The Return.
Yeah.
Because it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it's not even really set present day, right? It's mostly
Mostly in the past.
in the past, but it's about today in this really resonant way. Did you know when you made that episode what you guys did you guys know what you were doing? Did you guys know it was going to have this reaction? Because I think it's
Sure.
I think it's pretty well known now that it was a groundbreaking hour of television.
Well, the idea came out of the feeling that the larger issues of what was going on in this world that we had created needed something like an origin story. It needed not explanation, but illumination. We had to go back to the scene of the crime, the original scene of the crime that had perhaps engendered all that followed. And I remember I originally wanted to call the show Twin Peaks : and I'm going to forget the phrase in Spanish, but there's a section near Alamogordo that they call Dead Man's Passage. That's a section of desert where people just simply, if they entered in there, they weren't going to make it. That to me was pretty central to what we were going to do. And there are a lot of original sins if you look at American history, but the most modern and the most devastating is obviously the atomic bomb and the fact that we developed it. We were knock wood, we're still the only country that's ever dropped one on other human beings. And it felt like that might have been an entry point for something. And, and we'd been playing all along with this mythological notion of other dimensions and other realms, and our version of, a realm of the gods or the demigods, or a play of good and evil on another plane, that this felt like the organizing incident. And so it was very carefully scripted. The description of the entry into the cloud, was probably 2 paragraphs. And I think I remember David saying something like, I think this part's going to be about half an hour. And then we both wanted it to have the feel of a 1950s radioactive horror movie of Them, or The War of the Colossal Beast, or all those, Godzilla even. I mean, there's a whole genre that I grew up with on black and white television and the $1 Million Movie in Los Angeles, of nuclear weapons unleashed, devastating the natural world and creating all these mutations. So we both resonated pretty strongly to that as an idea. So that's where this sort of came from. And directorially, he killed it.
Got a light.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
It was a line we wrote that we felt that there were these sort of shade-like half-human creatures that might have picked up some vernacular somewhere.
Right.
Maybe by watching a film noir, or
right.
That they and that this would be their way to approach. I mean, it becomes sort of a zombie movie at one level, and then the poem that David actually wrote that himself, I think, on the set. That the guy, we originally in the script, I think, had him speaking a kind of mechanical language.
On the radio.
This is the water and this is the well.
Right.
And it really hits, and the guy delivered it beautifully. So that's where all that kind of took off from.
So in this realm of mysteries with ambiguity and no answers, and or some answers but not all the answers, or how do you So how did you guys? What was the compass like? What was the litmus test? Did you give out scripts? Oh, yeah, I guess you didn't give out any scripts. So you never looked for notes or on the cuts or anything like that. It was just you and David.
And it was David on the cuts. I mean, he said, I want to have final cut on this. I said, go for it, man.
And he didn't show. So there was no like, let me see if people are getting the things that I want them to get.
No, he trusts his instincts, and
Right.
and I'd say I trust his instincts.
So what about in the writing process? Were there ever moments where it's like, whoa, we've gone way too far out?
Yeah, and that's where you have, I think, the friction of collaboration to help
Right.
sand off those edges, where you do have to reality test it with each other. It has to make sense. It had to make sense to the two of us.
Right. And that's that internal logic you were talking about.
And I think if you've been doing it this long, as long as I have, it's over 40 years, you have to trust your instincts.
Right.
I mean, some network executive's going to tell you different.
Exactly.
And a studio guy's going to say, but it really means this. It's like, well, then I should probably just write books from now on, because I think I trust my own more than I trust yours. You may have a better commercial instinct. I wouldn't doubt that for a second.
And is that ever a consideration?
It wasn't here.
No.
And you're one of the fortunate ones who I think has been able to break through without that being a huge concern. I mean, I don't know what kind of input you're getting from the network, but
no, I mean, look, we get input, and for good reason. I invite it because I want to know what people are extrapolating.
Yeah.
What is being told to them, what isn't, and it's good to just know that.
Yeah.
Whether that influences how I change anything is, gratefully up to me, because the network really supports me, and that's a lucky position to be in.
Yeah.
But I do sometimes want to check in.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird because I know what I want to be a mystery, and then I know what I want to be clear, and it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, it's that difference. It's the difference between a mystery and a secret.
Right.
Or what, in a more kind of pragmatic way, what Hitchcock used to call the difference between secrets and suspense.
Do you like TV now? Do you like where TV has gone now?
Yeah, well, I think the short answer is yes, because I think there's shows like yours, and there are things, I'm finding there's at least one show at any particular time that I want to watch. That didn't used to be the case when it was 3 networks or 4 networks. You were lucky if you found one thing a year. At least I felt that way.
Do you have a favorite show you're watching now?
Well, I'm still watching the end of Ken Burns' Vietnam right now.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet.
It's remarkable. The other landmark event for me in TV in the 80s was the Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm a
You're a history buff.
huge history buff. And I'm from an old American family that goes back a long way. I had people on both sides of that war. And I'm old enough to have heard stories from grandparents who remembered stories from their grandparents. So it wasn't as the closeness of that event to us was remarkable. I even once went and toured all the Civil War battlefields alone about 15 years ago.
Did you ever consider doing?
I had an idea that I've been working on off and on about writing something about that. But
specifically the Civil War.
About that, yeah. I had a great uncle who was FDR's secretary for 10 years, his personal secretary. So I knew him as a kid, and he told me stories. He said, and he died in 1965 in his mid-80s, and he said he could remember his mother telling him stories about having seen Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys in Vermont.
Wow.
Now that's the Revolutionary War.
Right.
So I'm going, it's like time traveling.
Right.
And that's what kind of makes history come alive.
So that being, now that I know that that's a particular interest of yours, was that part of the inspiration for Twin Peaks at all? Was there anything about that? Because there does seem to there's a sense of, especially all the things that you were just describing, specific American history.
Yes.
There's an Americana feel, obviously, to Twin Peaks that seems intentional, and obviously I know from David
And it's
Lynch.
intrinsic, yeah.
Right.
And there's more of it in The Return, and there's a lot of it in the book,
Right.
which I wanted to do as a kind of companion piece to the whole series, not just the new one or the old one, and to fold, to create work with American mythology, and not most of the mythology that we get handed is very often secondhand British or other cultures.
Right.
I mean, you have your own culture that I think you bring things that we don't normally see.
Right. I mean, I grew up very much tech obsessed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the dawn of the PC, and I was, exposed to very interesting subcultures of hackers and techies in that kind of nascent area where they were starting to just come to rise, and then I would also get disgruntled with how Hollywood was representing that world, because it was completely inaccurate. Didn't really touch upon what was interesting about that subculture, and even though that was one of the drivers, ultimately, I think Elliot, his character and his worldview was my primary motivation, but exploring that world, setting it in that world, was just something that I was just a fan of. For whatever reason, I was gravitated towards that. And I knew I wanted to at least include the texture of that into the show. And it became the show, but yeah.
Well, and then it's also now become maybe the basis for a purloined election and international espionage. I mean, in ways that exploded far beyond what we ever knew was possible.
It's interesting. I've always wanted to tell this story for a long time, and for whatever reason, I think it was again a couple other forces in my life that finally had me put pen to paper when I did to write initially the movie, which turned into the pilot, and we just sort of came out around the time that hacking was in the public conversation, I think if it did come out 5 or 10 years prior, I don't know if it would have worked. Because I think it was too elusive. People would not have, it wouldn't have felt credible that somebody on a keyboard would feel that powerful, be that powerful. And now, of course, we think our election is dictated by it,
No, I mean, that's the lightning in the bottle factor that you cannot anticipate.
No.
That just means you just got hit,
When Twin Peaks first season came out, that was lightning.
That's what it felt like, yeah.
What was it about that time, that year, that for whatever reason, the stars aligned for you guys?
Well, what was strange about it was we had, and this I alluded to this earlier, that we had done the pilot, and then they sat on it forever because from a conventional storytelling standpoint, they couldn't make heads or tails out of it. There were fans of it at the network, but they thought...
Did they test it?
They tested it, and it tested very well, but they didn't trust it because they just said, this doesn't look like anything that's been born on our farm. It's like a three-headed cow. We don't know what this is. So they said, well, let's do this. Let's have you do 7 more hours. They really hedged their bets. So we wrote the scripts, and they said, okay, well, now why don't you go make those? And so this was all done in a vacuum. Nobody had seen a frame of it other than the network. So we had 9 finished, but with the 2 hours of the pilot and the 7 before it ever was seen.
Wow.
And then...
That's got to be very unconventional, especially at that time.
At that time, and we're 2 years into the process at that point, from start to finish.
Right.
And actually more, because when we pitched the show originally, there was then a writer's strike in '88 that delayed it another 8 months. So it was really attenuated. Then the 9 episodes air, and it's like we're the Beatles all of a sudden. We didn't know what to make of it. It was nuts. It was truly nuts. The internet was just coming to life.
Right.
Somebody came in one day halfway through the run with this huge stack of printouts from I guess, a very primitive form of an internet chat forum.
Right, BBSs or something.
Yeah, and plopped it on my desk and said, and I had no idea what that was. I mean, I had like an AOL account. You know? It's like I knew how to do email, but I didn't know that people were using it to do this. By the time we got to the second season, there was this white-hot glare of the media all over us.
Right.
And that's the conditions under which we made the second year were, and we had the pressure from the network to settle the mystery, and, you know, for whatever reason, they had to know. But coming back all these years later and doing what we did, I felt like that kind of completed the circle in a way that had been left hanging. A lot of people wanted to be persuaded that this wasn't just what they call fan service or a cash grab or, you know, a nostalgia trip. It was going to be something in and of itself that was either going to stand or fall.
I think it's groundbreaking once again. You guys came back and just changed the game for us all over again. And I don't know if it hit me over the summer. I don't know if it's hit everyone in that because look, the show it takes processing power. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
And patience.
And patience.
Yeah.
And but I think it's changed the game.
That's cool. Well, it'll be out on DVD, you know, soon enough, and people can scrutinize it maybe a little bit more and live with it. And that you know, that's sometimes what you have to do. Right. So we'll see where it goes. Now, when do you come back on the air?
We came back 2 weeks ago.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm behind.
Yeah,
I've been on the road for about 10 days, so.
Catch up.
Well, I'll catch up with it.
Yeah, I'll send you a couple episodes.
All right.
I'll actually get you ahead. How about that?
That'd be very exciting.
I mean, it's a small thank you for doing what you did and influencing a geeky 12-year-old who.
Happy to do it. Well, you know, like I said, doesn't matter where inspiration comes from, but everybody needs that spark, you know. I know you're a Kubrick fan.
I'm a huge Kubrick fan. But it feels like it's like Pay It Forward almost, right?
Yeah, that's what it's like.
I probably saw Twin Peaks before I saw my first Kubrick movie.
If that did for you what The Prisoner did for me, or 2001.
100%.
Yeah. Then that's pretty cool.
Is that a good note to end on?
It might be.
What do you think?
It might be.
Well, thanks, awesome. Man. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah,
this was great.
A good note for us to end on, Nick, is to send everyone to talkhouse.com for some fantastic pieces about Twin Peaks.
We have Krista Bell, David Lynch's muse, writing about all things Twin Peaks and David Lynch related.
I love that one.
And Bria Grant and Matthew Wilder also sharing their unique takes on the show.
Listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, head over to iTunes and Stitcher and subscribe. While you're there, rate and review. Every time you do, it helps someone else find the podcast.
Also, go find us on Instagram,
Twitter,
Facebook,
or YouTube, where we have full video episodes of the podcast recorded live at the Sonos store here in New York.
Well worth checking out. Thank you today to Gideon Brower for recording this conversation in LA.
And to Mark Yoshizumi for co-producing.
I'm Nick Dawson.
I'm Ellie Einhorn.
We'll see you next week.
Till then.